to politically ambitious Virgin Islander. Very articulate, very brilliant. So I'm excited. We are going to have a calling guest today. So the calls to the shows will not take place today. But if you have any inquiries, any comments regarding the presentation, you're welcome to place them on the WSTX Facebook page. Once again, welcome to At the Table with Crucian Educator. This is your host, Verdell Peterson. It's a pleasure to serve as the host for this 1 hour radio talk show and the number one radio station in the Caribbean, WSTX. You're listening on your radio dial to 970 AM, and the show also streams live on Facebook. So I'm awaiting a call in from a prospective candidate to the position as delegate to House of Representatives. And while we await, let me just mention that everybody is entitled to his or her opinion, view, idea, dream, theory, conclusion, perspective, belief, etc. But no one is entitled to his or her own facts. Facts can be verified. The position for public office, any public office in the U.S. Virgin Islands, is required to the candidates, prospective candidates, required to collect signatures on a nomination paper. And the supervisor of the election currently is Dr. Carolyn Thoughts, and her duty is clear. She certifies the candidates. She verifies her office, not just her. She has a staff. Her office verifies the validity of the signatures. The last day to submit the nomination papers, it must be, of course, notarized. And the last day is the 19th of May. But I believe the nomination papers could be submitted from tomorrow. Of course, there's a different number of signatures required regarding whether you're running as a independent candidate or a candidate from a political party. It's different number of signatures. The law is clear. I don't see any confusion in Act 8690, but apparently some Board of Election members are confused about what's the role and responsibilities of the supervisor of elections and their role and responsibilities as members of the Board of Elections. But I read the laws, not every single one, but pertinent ones. And every person running for a political office in the U.S. Virgin Islands has to go through this nomination process. The candidates are certified by the supervisor of election. That sole authority is granted to whoever holds that title. It's not a permanent position. The current supervisor of elections is Carolyn Fox, and she was appointed and hired by the Board of Elections. It's not an elected position. In my opinion, it would be a conflict of interest if the Board of Election members were to certify elections, since they run for an elected position. Members of the Board of Elections are elected by the electorate of the U.S. Virgin Islands. Therefore, I believe it's a conflict of interest to certify themselves. The law is clear. In my opinion, there is no confusion. The supervisor of elections certifies the election, conducts the election with the assistance of her staff. There has been no change in the election law. When you go to the polls, you don't have a choice of how you want your ballots to be counted and your votes to be counted. You can choose whether to mark on your paper ballot or to go to the express voting machine, a touch screen voting machine. You touch the screen, and that's especially useful for those that have certain disabilities, vision impaired issues, the elderly. It's faster than marking on the ballot. But for those of you that want to actually handle your ballot, have it in your hand and mark on it, you have that choice. But you don't have a choice that you want your ballot to be counted manually. Whether you use the touch screen machine or mark directly on your ballot, you are getting a paper ballot that must be inserted in a tabulator. The tabulators will count the ballots electronically. There's no need for hiring of additional election workers to tally votes and count manually, because that is less effective, less efficient than using tabulators. We're in the digital era now. Yes, there may be some states in which voters are allowed to have their votes counted manually, but they don't get a choice. You don't go to a jurisdiction that count votes manually and say, I don't want my votes to be counted manually. I wish for my vote to be counted electronically by a tabulator. There is no way under the sun in which a voter on the day of election could decide whether they want their votes to be counted manually or electronically. It doesn't happen any place in this world. Yes, there are places in which they exclusively hand count ballots, and that's fine. It works for them. But we have laws in the Virgin Islands, and we have made advancement in the use of digital technology, and most people don't want to go backwards. They want to move forward in the digital era. So I am still awaiting the call from my calling guest. I don't know what happened. We'll see what happens here. But in any event, again, let me remind you of certain facts. Voting is a choice. We live in a representative democracy. You, the voter, should expect confidentiality. You should expect that your vote will be counted. But if you don't participate in this process, definitely your vote is not going to be counted. Your vote is your voice, and your voice is your vote. If you don't wish to participate in the upcoming general election in November of this year, it's your choice. If you decide that you will participate, be reminded, in order to participate in the primary elections, which is scheduled for August 1st, the first day of August, the first Saturday in August, is a primary in which only registered Democrats by law are allowed to participate. So if you're not a registered Democrat, you cannot participate in the upcoming primary election. Well, it could change because aspirants still have time to pick up a nomination paper. So if more than 7 prospective candidates who are Republicans or ICMers are certified, they could also be in the primary election. But as of now, it looks like the primary election will only have Democrats. And that's because of the numbers. In order to be part of a primary election, a political party must have more than 7 candidates. And unfortunately, for the last election, we didn't have more than 7 Republicans. The last election cycle in 2024, we didn't have more than 7 ICMs. We had more than 7. I'm here. I'm not seeing the flash though. And the last election, there was only a primary election on St. Croix because in the St. Thomas St. John district, we didn't have more than 7 candidates in any political party seeking public office. That's the rule. Now, if you are interested in finding out whether you're on an inactive or active voter registration list, you can contact the Virgin Islands election system. The office is in Sunny Isles, where the theater used to be. And St. Thomas, you can find out exactly where the office is located, or you can go to the website, vivote.gov, and check on your status. If you are inactive registered voter, the law does not permit you to sign nomination petitions. If you sign a nomination petition and you're not a registered voter or you're an inactive registered voter, your signature will be declared invalid. So please check your status and find out exactly where you stand. If you have changed your physical address since the last time you were registered, please also update the information. You can go online to update your information. You can also register online. So those of you who have not yet registered, you have the opportunity now to go and register to be eligible to participate in the upcoming elections. No one is forced to register for a political party. It's your choice. If you wish to register as a Democrat, a Republican, an ICM, excuse me, or no party, that's your choice. In the final analysis, majority rules. Whoever gets the most votes for governor will become the 10th elected governor of the U.S. Virgin Islands. Whoever gets the most vote for delegate to Congress or delegate to House of Representatives will become the next delegate to House of Representatives. You can only choose one for governor, one for delegate to House of Representatives. However, you can choose up to 7 from the list of candidates in each district for a district senator seat. If you overvoted, the tabulator will indicate your ballot is spoiled, and you will have an opportunity to correct your mistake. That is the biggest advantage to using the tabulators. Tabulators are tested. All electronic devices and equipment used by the election system are tested to make sure that they're working properly. Mistakes do occur, mishaps. Sometimes the things beyond our control. What happens if the power goes when day of election? Is there a backup generator? Any questions you have concerning the election, you can go to the website to call the office of the supervisor and inquire. Knowledge is power. You should be well informed about the use of the machines. They conduct demonstrations for you. Don't be afraid of technology. It's simple. The young people shouldn't have any problems. Encourage a young person who is eligible to vote to register. From the age of 18, you are eligible to vote. Of course, if you're incarcerated, you're not eligible to vote. Each office has certain requirements, but regardless of which office a candidate is seeking to run for any public office in the United States, which includes the United States Virgin Islands, one must be a US citizen and must meet the requirement for residency and age. It varies. It's not the same number for every office. In the case of delegate to House of Representative, the age requirement is 25 years. If you are going to be making 18 on the day of the election, you are still allowed to register to vote as long as by the date of the election you're 18, you're allowed to vote. What's the residency requirement for each office, for each public office? That information you can go and find out. And let's see what happened. I don't know what happened with the guests. I'm still waiting for the guests to call in. I don't know what happened. Let me make sure they have the number here. The number to call into this show, but I'm expecting a guest. Pleasant good morning. Welcome to At the Table with Crucian Educator.
Good morning, Ms. Peterson. This is Mac McClafferty calling in. I see Janelle did not call in this morning, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to question me if you had any questions for me, as I'm also a candidate for delegate to Congress.
Well, thanks for calling. And it gives because I don't know what happened. Mishaps can occur. I was anticipating a call-in, but I do appreciate you calling in, and you're welcome.
Well, I was tuning in just to listen, and I noticed that for whatever reason, her call couldn't get connected, or she got tied up with other things. So I figured, for your listeners, I would call in and try to help you salvage the last half an hour.
Thank you. It seemed like poetic justice to me. Nonetheless,
Sounds good.
I appreciate it. Well, let me ask you this question. First, could you tell us why you have decided to put your hat in the ring and run for this particular position, delegate to House of Representatives?
Yes. Well, originally, as you know, I'm a business owner on the island of St. Thomas. I employ 36 local Virgin Islanders, and I also serve on the Governor's Advisory Council for the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. And so originally, I was going to make a run for the Senate. Obviously, there was a bunch of hoopla back and forth about requirements. And I meet the requirements. My attorney and I both were emphatic that I met all the requirements for the Senate. But the more we thought about it, we said, why do we want to get into a prolonged legal issue with some goofballs on the Board of Elections? I said, when I'm more qualified for delegate to Congress anyways. I served as a lobbyist for RNA in D.C. for many years. I got friends on both sides of the aisle. Right, I was a registered Democrat for 20 years. I just turned to change to independent 5 weeks ago because I am a centrist. I'm a moderate first and foremost. And to that point, I mean, I went to college with J.D. Vance, right, at Ohio State University. One of my best friends from high school, who also went to college with us, he's now in the Deputy Chief of Staff's office in the White House for the Vice President, which is J.D. Vance. So I mean, I have a lot of access to the White House, which I think is important. I'm not I wouldn't call myself conservative. I'm definitely not a Republican, but I am an independent, right? And because I have the benefit of having friends on both sides of the aisle, I think that I'm best positioned to be able to get the Virgin Islands the most federal resources and money possible. And we have to realize what is a delegate to Congress. Essentially, because it's a non-voting position, right? You're really, as a delegate to Congress, you're a lobbyist for the territory. So who is most qualified? It really isn't about where you were born or what is the color of your skin. It's really who can we send to Washington to get us in the Virgin Islands the most amount of money and federal resources possible. And I don't think that there's another candidate that I've seen so far. I know the 19th is when as you were stating, you did a great job of laying out all the deadlines and the requirements, all that stuff. 19th is the deadline. So we'll see who all ends up running. But, a lot of these people don't have access to both sides of the aisle. And D.C. is so polarized right now that if you don't have the ability as a delegate to the House of Representatives from the Virgin Islands, if you don't have the ability to work with this White House and a Republican Congress and Republican Senate, you're not going to get anything for the Virgin Islands. I'm going to tell you what really makes me fearful, and thank God we haven't had a major hurricane now in what is it now? 9 years, going on 9 years. Because, with this administration, which we all know can be very petty and very vindictive, given that, Ms. Plaskett, was an impeachment manager of the president's, and, I don't know how much federal aid we would get right now if there was a major catastrophe. So I think it's important that we have somebody in that position who can be a good lobbyist for the Virgin Islands. And honestly, I'm the only person that's done that position already. I mean, I've been a lobbyist in D.C. and I was very successful.
Who were you a lobbyist for again?
RNA. It used to be called Diversified Interest Group, and they've since been acquired by RNA.
Okay.
And then I decided to get into private equity just because I was getting a little bit burnout in DC at that time, just because of the amount we were putting in 80, 90-hour weeks, and the pay wasn't that great. So I got into private equity after that, and then I've been in the Virgin Islands since I was 11 years old. My family bought property here when I was 11. This was always my home away from home, so I always considered myself a part-time resident of the Virgin Islands. I became a full-time resident in 2020, and that's when I opened up the private equity firm here. And then a business partner and I, we opened the restaurant St. Thomas Social in 2022, but it didn't open until 2023. It took 6 months to really gut the old fat turtle and build what our vision was. So that's where we're at today. But my background is in public service. I was the youngest city commissioner in the state of Ohio at 19 years old.
Wow.
I was an elected member of the Democratic Party Central Committee. I served as the executive aide to the mayor of Akron, Ohio. It was Don Foswellick was his name at the time. And Akron, keep in mind, Akron has 240,000 residents. So Akron's over two and a half times the population of the Virgin Islands. So I was working on $320 million CSO and power projects. So given that we're in a territory, and listen, we're working with the EPA, we're working, and that's why I'm so familiar with the Federal Power Act, right? Which, I'm good friends with the governor. I get along great with the governor, but one thing we disagree on is I believe in federal intervention when it comes to the WAPA situation, right? And under the Federal Power Act, there's a resolution either by the legislature or through an executive order of the governor. We can invoke our rights under the Federal Power Act as a territory, which would allow the federal government to come in, the Department of Energy to come in for up to 90 days to do an assessment, and then after those 90 days, it can make a determination of our risk level, and then they can stay for up to 5 years, right? So
okay.
Provide us.
Thank you for calling in. We have another call coming in. But I do appreciate you, and I look forward to you scheduling.
Yeah, we'll continue this. We'll continue this conversation another time. Thank you.
Thank you. Be blessed.
Perfect. So, good morning to you. I'm going to put you on hold so that Riddell can pick you right up, okay?
Okay.
All right, blessings, please.
Okay. Answer now?
Mhm.
Okay. Pleasant good morning. Welcome to At the Table with Crucian Educator.
Hello, good morning.
Okay, go back.
Hello. Hello. Hey, all right, perfect.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you. Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
I am blessed. I'm anticipating a dynamic presentation, as I mentioned earlier, from a young, articulate, politically ambitious Virgin Islander. So you can introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning to the listening of the audience. Good morning to everyone in St. Croix, St. Thomas, St. John, Rhode Island, and diaspora. This is Janelle Thoreau, the candidate for delegate to Congress 2026. It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
Okay, and tell us what you are aspiring, what position you would like to be in, and why.
Sure. So I'm running for delegate to Congress. I got here. Interesting thought. Of course, I served 3 terms in the Senate. I have a formal education, BA and Master's in Political Science. And in completing my doctorate degree recently, I should be graduating in December. My topic is how democracy denied, the democratic deficit, and the case of the U.S. Virgin Islands. So we're doing all this extensive research back and forth on the insular cases and the temporary days and the consent decrees and all these things that keep us in a colonial state. I realized that the Virgin Islands had a lot of issues that were not really fully addressed or understood on a federal level. So one day I had this, I'm like, okay, cool beans. And I saw Stacey was running for governor. And I'm like, we've been immersed in all things federal for the past 4 years, writing a dissertation. So if Stacey's running for governor, I think I would best fit the role for Congress, given my formal education, my experience in the Senate, my cultural competence of the Virgin Islands as well. And I made a decision to run for delegate to Congress, and that's how I ended up here.
That's great. And I'm sure you have reviewed the qualification eligibility requirement based on the U.S. Code. I'm hearing some candidates claiming that they go to the U.S. Constitution. I don't see anything in there about the eligibility requirements to run for delegate to Congress. But are you familiar with the U.S. Code that gives the eligibility requirements?
Yes.
And what is your understanding of to be an inhabitant of the U.S. Virgin Islands in order to run for delegate to Congress from the U.S. Virgin Islands?
What is my understanding?
Be an inhabitant, because some members of the Board of Elections claiming that once you're elected, then you could start become an inhabitant, and I'm like, that's not my understanding.
Well, the code talks about. I mean, our code is kind of loose in defining an inhabitant, and that's always been a point of contention. When you come down after 90 days, you go to the Board of Elections, get your what should we call it, your voter's ID and your license, and that determines you to be quote unquote a resident inhabitant of the Virgin Islands. And then you have other parts of the code talks about your domicile. Your domicile is where you reside, and you can't have domicile.
Correct. So what is your domicile?
My domicile is the Virgin Islands.
Okay, and
you don't lose your domicile while you're full-time in place of.
I know that. So my question is this: have you ever not been a domicile of the U.S. Virgin Islands?
Never, ever.
And so, how long have you been rooted without exactly. If you wish to reveal, I mean, you're younger than me, way younger. But if you wish to reveal your
Yeah.
age, that's up to you. But how long have you been rooted in this Virgin Islands society or community?
I've been rooting. I've been rooting since when I'm 40 years old, if I'm to be honest.
That's very young.
So yeah, so I would say I've been rooting for 40 years.
Okay. And so you would say you understand all the current issues. And my question is, how would you describe the state of the territory and what five issues you believe are the most important and must be addressed by the Virgin Islands government?
So one is healthcare. The state of the territory, I would say at any minute the state of the territory is on life support. Um, and one would be the healthcare system.
Mm-hmm.
So where I'm at, there's a few things. One, we need to, on a federal level, the territory must be included in all things MEP, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's take, for instance, if you need assistive device, you qualify for a device through MEP, the Medical Assistance Program,
Mm-hmm.
which is Medicare and Medicaid.
Right.
You qualify for that in 50 states. When you move to the Virgin Islands, because the Affordable Care Act and many other MEP sections of the program doesn't extend to the U.S. Virgin Islands, then you're locked out of the vital opportunity.
Right.
Medical access
Right.
at that point. Two would be the TEFRA rebate and the healthcare side. TEFRA stands for Tax Equity Reform and Fairness Act. And the TEFRA rebate is the TEFRA law actually was passed, I think, between 1972 and 1980. We have yet to address our TEFRA rebate issue for the hospital. For the hospitals, the reimbursement is
Mm-hmm.
very, very low. And what is actually burdening the hospital is actually uncompensated care, which translates to bad debt because we have so many uninsured. We have public hospitals that have to treat you whether or not you could afford services. So that structure alone leaves our hospital at a very, very vulnerable place
Mm-hmm.
as well. So I would actually oppose, I would introduce legislation if the particular authority allowing for, well, let me go back. I would oppose any reduction to Medicaid
Mm-hmm.
and SNAP, which we refer to commonly as food stamps.
Mm-hmm.
I want to also push to eliminate the Medicaid cap,
Mm-hmm.
and secure appropriations for the stabilization of the hospitals and workforce development. And I also want to work with members of both sides of the aisle to actually mandate full inclusion of the territories in federally funded healthcare benefits. And of course, I said earlier that would also require us to modernize the reimbursement and ensure equity as far as the TEFRA basing goes. And also, there are also even onto our reimbursement of drugs, right?
Mm-hmm.
We need to address the impacts of the Medicare drug price negotiation program on territory pharmacies and healthcare providers. Pharmacies lose money when you have to give a Medicare patient, say, insulin, right? An insulin may cost $10 for the reimbursement, maybe $8. So pharmacies are actually losing money for those that actually fall on the donut hole or on the margin, and that strictly only happens in the territories because we haven't been included. And that's a long answer for one point. But
What is the most important thing to me? If you don't have good healthcare system, really nothing else matters if you're sick or dead.
Yes, and also even the delivery systems of the healthcare system as well. Now, remember the role of the traditional person in a Virgin Islands is really clearly defined. Remember now, like Title II would have the role of the Senate, Title II would have the role of the executive branch. The role of Congress isn't really clearly defined, which allows me some wiggle room to make the job my own. So what I'm also looking at is how we expand federal support for pharmacy-based care. How do we expand access to even veterans services within the territory? How do we leverage our Medicaid and Medicare policy to support long-term services and ensure the reimbursement reflects the cost of care only in the insular areas? Even using my federal relationships and to have public-private partnerships to attract investment in senior care infrastructure. We have an aging population, and the data shows it, but we don't have the infrastructure to support that. So people want to live and age with dignity at home, and we should be able to have some partnerships, public and private, to leveraging the federal dollars to get that done. And even strengthen the public health data systems. Our data systems are outdated. The way that we report the infrastructure and include the territory in these federal health surveillance systems. So that would be, it's expensive, but healthcare is very near and dear to my heart. And I realized that we had so many gaps and loopholes on a federal level that we need to really address. So that would be first and foremost what I would target.
And I appreciate you throwing your hat in the ring, because it has made the competition even stiffer. And because it seems like it's going to be very exciting. And I'm telling you, at this point, we have some brilliant women running for delegate to House of Representatives. It's going to be a tough decision, but I've given everybody an opportunity to come and present their platforms. And I know you will be running as a Democrat. And for that reason, because we have such dynamic, well qualified candidates aspiring for that position, I changed my registration from Republican to Democrat yesterday. So I want to ask you the question. I want to ask you the question. Why did you change your political part? No, you didn't. You were always registered as independent, right? No party. Why did you change to Democrat?
Well, correction. For the first, in college, I was actually the president of the college Democrat.
Oh yeah, okay.
I moved home and I was a Democrat for 6 years, and then I transitioned from being a Democrat to an independent. And I changed, and I'm to be honest with the public, I changed because I became very discontent with the local Democratic Party at the time. A lot was happening, the unwelcoming. I came home from college fresh, just wanted to just be a part of the process, the system. I wasn't looking for no handout. I wasn't looking for no job. I was already qualified for what I was doing. I just wanted to be a part. I wanted to engage my civic duty and give back. And the part I felt was less.
Okay.
So it didn't really align with my values. I'm a Democrat at heart. I have democratic ideas at heart. But so I transitioned to an independent, served for 3 terms in the Senate as an independent, and actually was the only independent in an all Democratic majority. So,
really?
I always had this in my colleagues. Yes, I never said a minority at all. So I was trying to joke with my colleagues that I'm more Democratic than are you. And we would look at us and we laugh about it. But I also realized too that if I'm aspiring to run for Congress, and the Congress, of course, is mostly divided down the line between Democrats and Republicans. I couldn't go on a line, Congress has about 430 something members of Congress. So I can't go into the House of Congress on a line just going with the wind and nothing gets done for the territory. I need to align myself. And I find myself to be more aligned with the democratic ideals of the national party But I intend to work closely with the Congressional Black Caucus, the Democratic Party, the territories, but not be polarizing to the Republican side because my job is not to go and just pick a side and pick on a side. My job is actually to do what's best for the territory. So if I have to align myself with 10 Republicans to get a job and for the territory to be it. Actually, that's why that's the reason why I changed to be a Democrat.
Well, obviously, you're a fighter. You've always been a fighter. You fight for right. And so this question, I think I know the answer to it. But let me ask anyway. Will you be fighting for Virgin Islands residents to be eligible for SSI?
Of course, without a doubt. That I want to fight. Oh, I think this will give you another platform point quickly, right? Because you ask me for five, but take a long time on one. But I will be fighting for SSI benefits. I will also be pushing for whatever the people decide when it comes to the Constitution. I also realize the importance of a Constitution as a policy major.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to shepherd through that Constitution through Congress, which will be our sixth attempt.
Yes.
Also, I want to address you're a retiree, and this is now there to me as well. The rum cover over needs to be addressed. I know that we're touting this great accomplishment that the rum cover over 1325 is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this major accomplishment. But coming from economics, something is called the time value of money. And the time value of money means that the dollar will decrease over time.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember, under Governor Turnbull was the first governor to get the extension of the rum cover over rate from 1050 to 1325. And that's in I think Turnbull came, Snyder was 95, Hurricane Marilyn, so Turnbull will be 96, 97.
Mm-hmm.
Then Peter said in 2026. So the rum cover over rate has been the same. Yes, we have gone back to 1050 a few times because it was never permanent. It was an extension always granted to us by various governors. Each and every governor of the Virgin Islands did receive the extension. So for us to, and as you know, the rum cover over 1325 is what we have pledged to the SPV to save the retirement system at 1325. No modern tax structure is based on a dollar value. So even if the cost or the selling of rum increases, the territory will never receive its fair share because we have locked the territory in to 1325. That's like you entering as a teacher at $28,000 and 10 years from now you want a raise. You can't get a raise because the last day you have a permanent salary. So I think it was really like an injustice to the Virgin Islands to lock us into a 1325 rum cover over rate. What we should have done is petition Congress to look back at the rum cover over every 5 to 10 years, look at the market, and add a percentage. So whether or not, when you look at tax sales, no matter what cost the item is, there's a percentage on the tax. So you always receive that amount of money, that percentage on whatever the cost of the item is. We should have given a rum cover over rate a percentage to be reassessed every couple of years. The Federal Reserve goes back very often and puts the interest rate up, down, in between. So I really, really want to go back and address the rum cover over because for us to be locked into a 1325 rate, which directly impacts the retirement system, I think was not the best decision for the territory.
Well, you have foresight. I'm glad you looking ahead, thinking in the future. I believe most of us don't think beyond 2 decades, but I'm glad that you look into the future generation. And yes, you're right. The only thing that's guaranteed is debt and taxes. However, change is constant.
We should be our guide. Remember, we put a dollar value to oil when we were producing oil and St. Glory, when we were, refining oil. And I think when it's the whoever cents per barrel, no matter how much oil go up or down, the territory never received its fair share on either because we didn't have the foresight to do a percentage. So the tax structure, I know that my opponent on St. Glory, the Felonies continues to brag about the 1325, but on her lobbying efforts, which I appreciate, but I don't think it was wise.
Well, you will have the opportunity to debate And I think both of you have
of course.
brilliant minds, and everybody will have the opportunity to vet the candidates, which I encourage. I encourage
Mm-hmm.
everybody to vet all the candidates and determine for themselves who is most qualified for the position, because only one, you can only choose one in that category, and your ballot.
And I
But
hope they choose me.
of course, and I know we, of course, you invited to come back again for a full session, because I'm giving everybody opportunity. I'm giving your political opponents the same opportunity. So it was mentioned about WAPA, and I'm pretty sure that's probably one on your list, because it's in the Revised Organic Act
Mm-hmm.
that we're supposed to get, what do you call that? Some excise tax on products produced in the territory,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
that relates to refining oil. I want to know what's your position with that, and also,
You mean the gasoline excise tax? That's what you're referring to?
yeah, and refining oil, and also it was mentioned by the previous caller, who is also seeking that same office, delegate to House of Representatives, about the WAPA situation. I'm not clear exactly, but would you be in favor of privatizing WAPA, or having it be taken over by the federal government?
It's funny that you say that. The only senator in the legislature at the time to actually put in reforms for WAPA was me. I moved legislation to reform, to change the WAPA board to more
Yes, I'm
technical
aware.
expertise.
Mhm.
Remember, the governor took us to court on the
Yes.
matter because the WAPA board was still nothing but cabinet members doing political bidding. I need to remember the hearing on October 1st, 2019, when Director Lee of IRB told us straight up he zones out after the first 15 minutes because it's very technical, and no offense to him, that's not his wheelhouse. So I realized the board was really sure people are just so that yes. You know, if you come in a board to solve, I'm quite intelligent, but that's not my wheelhouse. Things like talking megawatts and that kind of thing, I will be lost myself. So I realized that the water board needed more technical expertise, and we pushed for that. We also pushed for water to bill. A billing cycle must only be 30 days. I remember when water was giving you bills that were like 60 days, 72 days,
Mm-hmm.
all kind of crazy days. We also moved a decision for water oversight and turnaround committee. So my first step, actually, let me go back. We strengthened the PSC. We gave the PSC more oversight. So there's a PSC oversight bill also that I moved, and after I worked very closely with, at the time, Director Cole over the PSC and Attorney Boyd's friend, legal counsel. And my office went back and forth. Many working meetings to get that done, and through the subcommittee of energy and infrastructure. And then following that, we moved the water oversight and turnaround committee. The governor finally pushed for it with Anthony Young recently. They issued a report. But my end goal at this time is that we missed the mark years ago. I must have been in high school at the time when I think Southern Energy came in and we voted against it. But I honestly believe at this point in time, Apple may need to be privatized. Yes, I agree with that. And he asked me a question about the gasoline excise
Excise
tax.
taxes, yeah.
You didn't use the word correctly, but I know what you're referring to.
Okay, what's the
Gasoline
correct
excise tax.
terminology?
No problem. But the gasoline excise tax has roughly the federal government owes us some billions of dollars as it stands. I think Judge Hodge was very instrumental in fighting for that when he was Attorney General under Cyril King. That's how far back this thing goes. And we passed numerous resolutions in the Senate asking Congress to reconsider remitting some type of payment to the territory for the gasoline excise tax. And that's something that I have no problem in championing on a congressional level as well. As far as the refinery, given the refinery has sat so idle for so long that if I can't stop a private business, government is not there to tell a private business what kind of business you could get into. If the refinery is to restart, it needs to restart in a more environmentally safe manner.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be some really, really strong protocols in place because the cancer rate of Sequoia is ridiculously high.
Mm-hmm.
I would believe there is some effect to the refinery because historically speaking, the refinery was built, it predates the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency. It predates the Air and Water Act. So for a very long time on St. Croix, the refinery operated without any environmental regulation at all. And of course, it predates the establishment of even DPNI. Remember, DPNI was on Conservation and Cultural Affairs before the reorganization in 1987 and entirely. So if the refinery is to restart, we definitely need to have those protocols in place. But I think it's high time the refinery should go into the direction of public green energy. Green energy is where it's at. It's already this large behemoth of industrial site. But I think that, St. Croix can benefit from some high level green energy plants where the emissions are in great, the environmental impact is in great, and the carbon footprint is actually dramatically reduced.
Oh, well, I'm glad you're thinking ahead. Like I said, straightforward. I know you don't back down from controversial issues, and you like to take a position, which I greatly admire. So let me ask you this question. There's been a controversy concerning creating more distilleries of spirits, not rum, spirits. We have two rum distilleries in the U.S. Virgin Islands, as far as my understanding. It's the Diageo and the Crucian rum distillery. However, there's some consideration of having breweries and distilleries of spirits, but there are some environmental issues, some concerns pertaining to that. Have you been keeping up on that matter? And what's your thought?
I have been because remember my former running mate Jelly was married in the Frederick House.
I recall
about that very same issue with the micro distilleries and the prosperity farms in Frederickston.
Mm-hmm.
Where I stand on that is, like I said, we have to find a balance between economic development and how we protect the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't support anything that harms the environment, but at the same time, remember, I'm running for Congress, so I wouldn't be involved in the nitty-gritty of the zoning process
right
between the legislature, DPNR, etc. So I would say that I'm not for or against it. I am for sustainable economic development. So I can't carte blanche just sit here and sit there and oppose.
Mm-hmm.
So I am for. I would have to see what the agreement says. If a micro distillery regarding spirits have to come before me, say I saw in the Senate, I would have to look at it. I'm a reader. I would look at the documents.
Mm-hmm.
I would do my investigation. I would ask speaker now to take me to the site. I would call a company and ask them, you take me to the site. What are you doing? I would go and speak to the constituents and the stakeholders. I would hear the options on whether or not it is harmful for the environment or not. So it would be really presumptuous of me to sit here and be like, okay, I'm against it, I'm for it. Everything has to be done in moderation and with balance.
That's reasonable. I think we should hear both sides and get the data. Facts can be verified. And there's this other issue with the some members of the Board of Elections pushing to have the election law amended to allow voters a choice on the day of election whether they want their ballots and votes to be counted manually or electronically. Do you have trust and confidence in this Virgin Islands election system, or do you find it needs some reform to it?
I would say yes. I would say yes to both. I do trust the system, and the system has worked for me. Now, when I had the Kevin Rodriguez saga, of course, as we know, that was a long saga. The justice, even if the election system at the time I felt, aired on a few things, I still had faith in the democratic system, which includes a judiciary, that the judicial branch was able to actually step in and make a wrong a right. And that's where the balance of government comes in. But I can't be against an election system that actually worked for me, where I was a top vote getter um, the, in the last, in the 34th legislature,
Mm-hmm.
and I was elected consecutively by the people of the Virgin Islands to serve on their behalf. So I wouldn't I don't have any faith in it. I think that there must be election reform, and that comes from the Senate. And I too am guilty of not doing as much as I could for election reform, because in the Senate we tend to say the legislature should be reduced to whatever amount of senators, but the speaker's job is a lot. Having served, I could say firsthand, between trying to save GRS and then you have disaster recovery and you sit on 5 different committees. So every day on the Senate floor with a different subject before you. Then you have budget hearings from July all the way until October 1 to pass a balanced budget. That election reform never really sits at the forefront of the present issues that we have. But we do need a level of election reform. The election code is very, very outdated. So I would say yes, I believe in the system,
Mm-hmm.
but I also would agree that reform is necessary. And hopefully, too, with the Constitutional Convention pushing forth a document that we could get through to Congress, hopefully election reform will also be um, on, on that as well.
Well, I want to thank you for this dynamic presentation, and I wish you the best. I know you are hopeful in getting elected. You were elected by tabulators, and it will happen again. Tabulators will be in place, and the voters have a choice. So I'm encouraging all the voters to participate in the election and get all the accurate information, vet your candidates, and you're invited, if you are not already a member of my Facebook group, Virgin Islands Affairs Forum. There you can put your platform. You can virtually interact with constituents, with voters. So anyone have inquiries regarding this presentation today, or you want to share comments, you can go to the Facebook page of WFCX, and you're also welcome to join Virgin Islands Candidates Forum. Once again, thank you. It was a pleasure.
No problem. Thank you for having me, and thank you to those listening and viewing. And I humbly ask for your support. On the first and Democratic primary to delegate to Congress, this is General Q. Cyril, Senator to the Hill.
Be blessed. Live, listen, learn, love, and levitate. Be blessed, everyone.